Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into cannabis. You know, it feels like it's gone from the fringe to the absolute mainstream overnight. And the amount of information out there can be, well, pretty overwhelming. So our goal today is to cut through all that noise and get to what we really know, and just as importantly, what we don't.
It seems like everywhere you look, laws and attitudes about cannabis are changing at lightning speed. And of course, everyone has an opinion. So, the big question for us is, what does the science actually say? Let's push past the headlines and the hype and look at the real data.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll get a feel for the new cannabis landscape. Then we'll look at who's using it and, crucially, why. After that, we'll tackle the really complex picture of its health effects. Then we'll zoom out to policy and equity, and finally, we'll see what's happening on the absolute frontier of the research. So, as cannabis steps out of the shadows and into the spotlight, this massive shift is bringing up some really critical questions for all of us, whether you're a consumer, a patient, or a policymaker. Now more than ever, we need clear, evidence-based answers to guide us. So who are the real people behind this whole trend? You know, science is finally moving past these broad generalizations to figure out why very specific groups of people use cannabis. And a perfect example of this is a fascinating new study that looks at the link between cannabis use and ADHD.
Okay, so how do you study something like this in the real world? This is so clever. Instead of asking people to remember what they did weeks ago, researchers used smartphones. They tracked young adults' daily ADHD symptoms and their cannabis use in real time. This gave them this incredibly precise moment-by-moment window into their actual lives.
And here's the kicker, the key finding. It's super nuanced. The study found that on days when a person's ADHD symptoms were worse, they didn't necessarily use more cannabis. But, and this is the important part, they were much more likely to experience negative consequences from the cannabis they did use. So the real story here isn't just about use, it's about risk.
Now, another huge group driving cannabis use is, of course, people searching for relief from chronic pain. I mean, pain is one of the leading causes of disability all over the world, and with the ongoing opioid crisis, it's no wonder so many patients are looking at medical cannabis as a potential alternative to improve their quality of life.
And this brings us right to the heart of the matter. When you really dig into the health effects of cannabis, it is absolutely not a simple story of good for you or bad for you. The reality is so much more complicated. So let's break this down. On the one hand, you have the science showing real potential benefits. A major 2024 review, for example, found that non-inhaled medical cannabis can lead to significant pain relief. But then you flip the coin, and on the other side, you've got documented risks, like dizziness from inhaled use, or those greater negative consequences for people with ADHD symptoms we just talked about. It really shows that when it comes to health, context is everything.
But you know, this science isn't just happening in a sterile lab somewhere. It's happening out in the real world. So, let's zoom out a bit, from the individual person to the bigger societal forces that are shaping this whole experience. We're talking regulation, marketing, and who's actually benefiting from this new industry.
You see, a big promise of legalization was social equity. The idea was to help the communities that were hit hardest by the war on drugs get a piece of this new legal industry. But is that actually happening? Let's take a look at the data from Massachusetts as a real-world case study.
Okay, so back in 2020, about a year and a half after legal sales started, the data painted a pretty stark picture. A full 75% of the state's cannabis workforce was white, and you saw similar numbers when it came to who owned the businesses. So, have things gotten better since then?
Well, by 2023, that number had budged, but only down to 70%. So yeah, there's been some progress, but it's been really slow. And it shows that just writing equity into the law is one thing, actually making it happen in the real world is a much tougher fight.
And then there's the marketing. A study looked at how cannabis is being advertised, and honestly, it's a very familiar playbook. You've got your holiday specials, your price promotions, but what's really catching researchers' eyes are things like cartoon-like images and ads that look a lot like candy or junk food, which raises all sorts of questions about who these ads are really appealing to.
All right, for our final piece, let's look at the absolute cutting edge.
This is where scientists are basically in a mad dash to keep up with a market that is just moving way, way faster than the research can.
One of the biggest challenges right now are these things called derived psychoactive cannabis products, or DCPCs. We're talking about compounds like delta-8 THC. The tricky part is, they're often made in a lab from legal hemp and then sold in places like vape shops or even gas stations, completely outside of the regulated, tested legal cannabis market. And these products are everywhere. Just look at this. A 2023 study found that over 60% of vape shops in the US were selling intoxicating products like delta-8 and delta-9 THC. This creates this huge regulatory gray area where these things are available even in states that have tried to ban them.
And the scope of all this research, well, it gets pretty wild. It turns up in some pretty unexpected places. In fact, it's not even just about humans anymore.
Yep, even our pets are part of the story now. A study looked at giving CBD to healthy dogs long-term, and they found something really interesting. While the dogs handled it well overall, the CBD did cause a steady increase in a specific liver enzyme called ALP. Now, it's a subtle finding, but it's a really important piece of the puzzle for vets and for any pet owner who's thinking about these products.
Okay, so let's boil this all down. What are the big takeaways? First, the science is moving incredibly fast, but it's complex, and the findings often seem to contradict each other. Second, context is absolutely everything. Who is using it, why they're using it, and what product they're using can totally change the outcome. Third, the market is just lapping the research right now, especially with these new products, which leads to the final, most important point. Being an informed, critical consumer is your best tool.
And that leaves us with the big, lingering question, doesn't it? In this new world of legal cannabis, with a flood of new products and marketing coming at us from all sides, how do we, as individuals and as a whole society, make responsible choices when the science itself is still racing to catch up?